June 1960. And the document you are about to hear is the full internal transcript, recorded word for word, of how the first open fracture between the Soviet Union and the People's Republic of China began. It starts with a small moment, a detail almost too strange to be accidental, as the Bulgarian delegation rose to speak, and as Todor Zhivkov began reading his prepared text, the Chinese delegation's headphones suddenly stopped working. No translation, no audio, just silence. And yet, Zhivkov continued reading, cold, deliberate, unwavering. What followed was not a peaceful session between brotherly parties, but an ideological clash, an accusation of betrayal, and the opening shots of a split that would shake the entire socialist world. And now, the document begins. The first voice captured in the transcript is Todor Zhivkov himself, speaking calmly, but with an unmistakable edge.
Zhivkov began reading, saying, "Comrades, the development of the international communist movement and of all our socialist countries since the Moscow meeting of 1957 has fully confirmed the correctness of the Moscow Declaration." He paused and continued in a steady, deliberate tone. "We must clearly acknowledge that the line, the policy, and the position of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union reflect the fundamental principles of Marxism-Leninism, especially regarding peaceful coexistence, the struggle between the two systems, and the fight for world peace." Zhivkov continued firmly. This policy, supported not only by the working people of the socialist countries, but also by democratic forces worldwide, and even by certain governments in capitalist states, has proven its strength. He leaned forward, emphasizing each phrase. The Soviet government, and personally, Comrade Khrushchev, have done great and outstanding work in this regard. He added sharply, "I must underline the correctness and the principled nature of the policy of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. The CPSU, always keeping the initiative in its hands, using the contradictions within the capitalist system, and acting in line with our political, economic, and other capabilities, deals powerful blows to imperialism, placing it on the defensive." Then, with noticeable coldness, Zhivkov turned toward the issue of China. The Chinese comrades signed the Moscow Declaration, but today, they have stepped away from its principles on several issues and have committed a number of errors. His tone hardened, and the worst part is that they want to impose their own position on other fraternal parties. He spoke even more slowly. They insist, stubbornly, that various international organizations should embrace their line.
At this point in the transcript, Zhivkov's voice becomes more accusatory, the first open criticism of China inside a socialist summit.
Zhivkov continued, accusing. "For example, they acted in exactly this way at the session of the World Federation of Trade Unions in Beijing, distributing documents and materials behind the backs of fraternal parties, employing the same methods as the Yugoslavs, openly spreading their incorrect views." He said bluntly, "Why do they behave like this? They wish to impose their views on others, and this has already caused disagreements between them and the other fraternal parties."
The meeting, originally intended as a harmonious summit, had turned into an ideological tribunal.
Zhivkov pressed on, saying, "We consider it correct, the proposal of the CPSU, that questions related to the declaration must be discussed openly, and that we must help the Chinese comrades correct their mistakes. But if the Chinese comrades insist, if they continue on their erroneous path, then we must openly resist them." He warned, because their mistakes can cause a split in the international communist and workers' movement.
From here, the transcript moves to an earlier episode, a 1958 Bulgarian parliamentary delegation visiting China.
Zhivkov recalled calmly, "In late 1958, our parliamentary delegation visited China. Upon returning home, they reported on their conversations with Comrade Mao Zedong and other responsible comrades. These Chinese leaders presented, extensively, their views on several important matters, including theoretical questions. Zhivkov repeated their claims, with disbelief in his tone. They said that we have forgotten the elementary principles of the theory of revolution, that we have abandoned the theory of permanent revolution, that our struggle for peace is merely pacifism. He paused, then added, and that Lenin himself once considered an immediate transition to communism through war communism, and that only circumstances prevented him from doing so.
The transcript notes that these Chinese views were repeated everywhere, in speeches, in party documents, in the press.
Zhivkov continued reading, voice steady. At the WFTU session in Beijing, the Chinese comrades attempted to impose their views on the question of peace and war upon the delegations of our countries and upon the delegations of the capitalist countries. He referenced evidence presented by Soviet delegates. From the materials presented by the Soviet comrades, we can see clearly the seriousness of the errors and shortcomings of the Chinese comrades. We fully support the views expressed in the CPSU document and agree that the Chinese comrades have deviated from the declaration on several key questions.
Now the criticism grows broader, deeper, more ideological.
Zhivkov declared, "Between us, there are principal differences in assessing the international situation and in assessing the struggle for peace." The CPSU document correctly notes that the Chinese have departed from the principles of the declaration, presenting the entire epoch of transition from capitalism to socialism as an epoch of imperialism and war. He emphasized, this dogmatism prevents them from seeing the enormous changes that have taken place in the international situation. Zhivkov listed these changes one by one. The emergence of a mighty socialist camp, the growth of Soviet military power, the increased unity of the international communist movement, the expansion of the peace movement, the weakening of imperialism, the collapse of the colonial system, and the rise in the number of states supporting peaceful coexistence.
Then the transcript shifts into a theoretical dispute: imperialism, Leninism, and the nature of war.
Zhivkov stated lecture-like, "The Chinese comrades have not made a concrete analysis of current conditions. Lenin's teachings on imperialism remain correct. Its nature has not changed, and as long as imperialism exists, the source of war remains. But," he stressed the word, "the international situation has undergone profound changes. The balance of forces has shifted dramatically." He continued, "Imperialism is still imperialism. As the saying goes, you can skin a wolf, but you cannot change its nature. However, today imperialism can no longer act with the same freedom as in the past."
This was the heart of the Soviet line. Peaceful coexistence is possible.
Zhivkov explained, "Lenin's positions require us to consider the changes in the balance of forces. One cannot simply declare that war is inevitable as long as imperialism exists. Such a view is metaphysics, dogmatism." He warned against China's revolutionary rhetoric. The Chinese comrades speak of paper tigers. They say they do not fear a Cold War. They wrap themselves in revolutionary phrases. But their position is pseudo-revolutionary. Zhivkov defended the Soviet path. "Our policy of peaceful coexistence is a Leninist policy. It is achieving great successes. It is sparing humanity from nuclear war. The vast development of socialist economies, the rise of Soviet power, the exposure of imperialist warmongers, all these undermine imperialism."
Now comes the climax, the accusation that China endangers world peace.
Zhivkov said heavily, "We can defeat imperialism in economic competition and achieve victory without a bloody war. But peaceful coexistence does not mean naive illusions. There will be resistance from the enemy." He noted that imperialists oppose peaceful coexistence, escalate tensions, and prepare for war. Zhivkov brought up Khrushchev's failed summit. Before the Paris summit, the United States escalated tension, undermining the progress achieved by peaceful coexistence.
Then another blow to China's line.
Zhivkov stated, "Despite the aggressive nature of imperialism, our task is to strike at imperialism, to force it to abandon the Cold War and move toward peaceful coexistence." He discredited China's criticisms. The Chinese claim that peaceful coexistence weakens the revolutionary will of the working class, the colonial peoples, and the struggle against imperialism. He said flatly, "These assertions are incorrect." He then cited events in Turkey, South Korea, and Japan as proof that peaceful coexistence strengthens revolutionary momentum, not weakens it. Zhivkov pointed to the Suez Crisis. The suppression of British and French aggression against Egypt proves that war is not inevitable. Zhivkov summarized, "On one hand, they say a new war can be prevented. On the other hand, they say such a belief is an illusion." This contradiction reveals the dogmatic roots of their position. He concluded with Leninism versus Maoism. Marxism is creative. Without creative development, Leninism could not have emerged. Thus, the modern conclusion, that war is not fated, is a legitimate development of Marxism-Leninism.
This was only part one, the opening chapter of a long and heated meeting, where the communist world began to fracture from within. Do not forget to subscribe and continue with part two, where the tensions rise even further and the split becomes impossible to hide. The story continues on the Black Folder.